All right, everybody. I want to introduce you to Tatum Langton. She is a actor, producer, writer, and former client of us, Dream Reach Media. And I actually directed her in our little award-winning film, American Hate, which is doing a lot of festival stuff. So I wanted to bring you on, Tatum, because you are you just told me that you were moving over to Atlanta, testing the waters there a little bit. You've obviously worked in LA for quite some time. You are in the middle of performing a play that you produced, wrote, and kind of put together yourself. And there's just lots going on. So first of all, welcome. Thanks for joining us here.
Thank you for having me.
It's awesome to see you again. So can we go back and talk a little bit about just the beginnings of what kind of made you pursue acting, and then you can dip just a little bit into maybe your upbringing and maybe some conflicts that you might have had there, and if you want to sort of organically evolve that into how that turned into this play that you're doing right now. I can just let you riff if you want to kind of go, or if you want to.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's going a ways back, but I started acting. I grew up in Utah, which acting is not like, it's not a big thing there. It's getting better, but I mean, it was definitely one of those things where when as a kid, I told my parents that I was interested in acting. I mean, I was 12 years old and I was in the school play and I just loved it. I was always a really shy and reserved kid. So when we had these auditions for our school play, it was kind of this, I saw it as like a way to not be shy. Because I don't know if anyone else can relate, but being shy, like, it's not fun all the time. Like I never wanted to be shy. I just was. And so like acting kind of made me, it looked like this thing like, oh my gosh, I can be fun and outgoing and whatever I want to be in front of people, and no one's going to judge me because I'm acting. And so that's kind of that's where I got the spark initially. But in Utah, my parents really didn't know what to do with that, because if you're not like there's like some local theaters that are really big, but it's more of a hobby. It's definitely not a career. They didn't really know what to do with it, so I kind of acted on and off in high school and college, but it wasn't until I was in my like mid-20s that I realized that there was more acting to do in Utah besides theater. I liked theater. It was just a little bit harder for me to get into. And but by that time I was married. I got married young. I did grow up Mormon. I'm still Mormon, but like definitely grew up in that community. And so I got married really young. That didn't work out. And which is what my one woman show is all about. So I'll just kind of gloss over that for now. But that didn't work out, and I ended up moving to LA because by then I realized like this is actually what I want to do. And
how was that move for you? Like, were you prepared for that, or did you have any support with that, or how did that work out?
Well, after I got divorced, it was a lot easier. And kind of just like that whole not being supported in that dream, which is kind of understandable when you grow up. I think it's less so now because now we have social media and everybody is closer and everybody understands each other a little bit differently. Which sounds so funny, but even just like, 10, 15 years ago, it just like Hollywood and LA seemed so far away that for a lot of people, I think in the Midwest or, Utah, which is West, but they just don't get it. They're just, why would you ever want to do that? So there was support, but it wasn't like, it was almost like, oh yeah, go do that thing and get it out of your system. And, we'll see you back here in a couple of years. but I knew when I was, because I mean, I basically had gone through a divorce to be an actor. So I was like, no, if I'm gonna go, I'm burning the bridges. I'm not coming back. Not to say that I don't love Utah, but I just knew, I'm like, no, this is it for me. So, so yeah, it was, I really, I mean, I remember when I told my parents that I was moving, and I don't think they took me seriously until it was like 2 weeks before I was leaving. And I said, I'm leaving in 2 weeks. And then my mom finally was like, wait, what? Where are you going to stay? Do you know anyone out there? And I was like, no, but I'll figure it out.
Did you just have like money and work lined up, or how did you deal with it financially? Because it's obviously a big shift in just your life in general.
Yeah. I had met one actor who lived out there. He wasn't out there at the time though. He was in Dallas filming something, and he's like, I'm not going to be there for 3 months, but you could just stay in my place.
Oh, nice.
And yeah, I was like, thank you. He's like, you can stay in my place while you look for someplace else to live. But he wasn't ever there. So it was kind of funny because I was still just in this apartment. Like, I don't know anyone. But I had, right before I moved, like 3 months before I moved, I met someone in Utah who was from California. And she said, I work at California Pizza Kitchen in Utah, in downtown, like Salt Lake City. She said, if you got a job there, you could transfer to California, which was one of those ideas where I was like, even at the moment, I was like, well, because I'd never been a server before. And she was just like, Tatum, you're doing it. Like, I'm going to get you the job. You're going to start tomorrow. And I just kind of jumped in, and it worked out. I just transferred to California. So I actually do recommend people do that all the time, because it's like, hey, if you can have a job before you even get there, it's really nice to not have to worry about that. But other than that, I will say this is one of the perks of being in a religious community. Being Mormon, I just knew, I'm like, I'm just going to go to church, and I'm going to meet people there, and I'll find some friends and some roommates, and that's exactly what I did.
Okay.
There's a lot of Mormons in California. A lot of people don't know that. But,
Well, isn't that a big establishment on Santa Monica there, right across in Century City? Isn't that a Mormon
that's
church?
a Mormon temple. It's a temple. Yeah, it's not where we go to church, but that's a temple. But yeah,
Gotcha.
so, and there's like singles wards where like young adults ages 18 to 31 go to church to like meet other singles. And so I knew, I'm like, I'm just gonna go there and I'll meet some cool people, I'm sure. Which I did, especially out in California, where there's like lots of artists. So there was a lot of Mormons, but a lot of working Mormons who are artists and like directors and dancers and producers. And it was actually a really great way to get started in California. Having not known
with that, like with the religious side of things, that and the industry and just how it operates, or what your potentially might be asked and stuff. How did you deal with those things?
Yeah, so that is, yes. And that is actually also something that I don't talk about that a lot in my one woman show, but it definitely comes up. Because obviously I was in a marriage, and a Mormon marriage. So that comes up a lot. Because yes, I do get asked that a lot. Like, how do you uphold your Mormon standards and values and be an actor who gets asked to do various things? One, I mean, maybe it's just me, but I have not been asked to do crazy. It's not like I've been asked to do a lot of that kind of stuff anyway. So to me, I'm just like, well, maybe when that time comes, then I'll know what to do. But honestly, it hasn't come. So it hasn't been an issue for me. But that just might be the kind of, I don't know. Sometimes I think energy has a lot to do with that, like what you attract. But also, I'm definitely more relaxed about that kind of stuff. I kind of made up my mind of like, I believe in this, in acting as an art form. And I don't think that if I decided to do nudity, or if I decided to do certain things that the church would frown upon, I don't believe that I believe that it is my decision, and that it doesn't or shouldn't affect my religion. So that's just something that I kind of came to terms with for myself.
Sure.
Having said that, I've never actually been asked to, or I've never really been in that kind of situation. So,
But it's good that you had that thought, right? Like I talk about kind of preparing for, even when people move out to LA, I get a lot of questions about like, what do you recommend and stuff. And, you know, with the program I have, I help people like obviously build their own businesses. And I have ways to doing something similar to what you did, which basically make sure you have some income lined up before you get out there. But what I talk about a lot is also like coming up with your worst case scenario, because when you really start looking at your worst case scenario, you can kind of come up with a plan of what you're going to do with it. And then you can actually have a plan of action sort of worked out. Like, hey, if I get asked to do a sex scene, here's XYZ, here's how I think about it, how I, you know, what my stance behind it is. Or when I move to LA, like, here's the sequence of the most like terrible, worst events that could happen. And here's what my plan would be if that were to happen. And then you have this action plan. It's like, okay, worst case scenario, I go live in my mom's basement for 6 months and I rebuild myself. Best case scenario, I never go back and everything works out. And then people realize, well, you know what? I have the worst case scenario worked out. You can now pack it up, stow it away, like have it as something that you can sort of reference, but it's not floating around as anxiety in your head the whole time. And
yeah,
it just,
yeah, totally. And I also realized, and this comes up for me on I feel like a daily basis still, that until it happens, you really don't have to worry about it. So it's like, once you answer the question, like, well, what would I say, or what would I do? And you can just simply kind of say, well, like, actually, I don't think it's that big of a deal, but it depends on the circumstances. That to me is like, okay, well, then I don't have to worry about it until it happens. And it hasn't happened. So like, I'm glad that I didn't spend a lot of time worrying about it, because it hasn't even happened.
Yeah. Don't worry about things that haven't happened. I talk about that too, my family. So let's go from Tatum arrives in LA. She finds a good community, a like-minded community, which is great. That's always important. And then how does it get to the point where you're getting on Grey's Anatomy and General Hospital, and you have an agent and a manager, and how does that happen? You came out here with nobody and nothing, and you have, tell us a little bit about your story with representation and growing the gigs that you've been getting.
Yeah. Honestly, it took some time. I wish I could say that it like happened very, very quickly. I will say, like, in the first couple of years, things were happening. It seemed quickly. Everyone was telling me it was happening quickly, and maybe the realization of that all of a sudden made things slow down. Like I stopped believing in myself or something, because I definitely had a window. I mean, a huge window where I was like, "What's going on? Nothing is happening." I think it was just, for me, it was a big learning curve. I really didn't know what I was doing. I did not know the industry. It is such an interesting world. I mean, and not just like, there's acting, there's filmmaking, there's the music industry, there's modeling. I mean, there's so many different entertainment industries in LA, and each one has its different challenges. And for me, honestly, the biggest thing I knew to do was just to meet people and to just get myself out there in any way that I could, and taking classes, workshops. I mean, being a part of communities like this, or like, you know, listening in on, gosh, back then, what was it? I mean, like Zoom is pretty new, but like, you know, just whatever I could, going to different seminars or whatever I could to just learn as much as I could. And then honestly, just to meet people. I think that might have been the biggest thing that I undervalued in my first few years of living in LA, is the people that I met. Because I mean, I was happy to meet people, but I don't think I cared as much as maybe I could have. because, and I know you probably tell this to your people, but you never know. You really never know who is going to become what. And I've had so many friends that I met in the first year of moving to LA that are now directors on big projects, or they're casting directors or producers, or it's amazing to me. And I was just like, Joe Schmo that I met at some party, like it's crazy. So yeah, that was like a big thing for me, really just meeting people and learning to start value those relationships. But other than that, I would just say there's something to say about longevity and sticking around, and just trial and error. I mean, a lot of it is just like, okay, well, that didn't work. Why didn't that work? Okay, what else can I do? Let's try this. Let's try this different class. Maybe get advice from someone else or find a better mentor. I feel like I'm still always reevaluating what to do next. This past year has been one of the best years that I've had as an actor. I feel very blessed since we are in the middle of a pandemic. But a lot of it was just, I find that when I decide that I'm going to keep myself busy and I'm not waiting around for something, even like doing Dream Reach Media was one of those things where I'm like, I'm not going to wait around. I'm going to just do something. And then this past year, I decided to write my one-woman show because I was like, I don't want 21 to be like 2020. So I wrote my show. And after I had made that decision to write my show and I started building that momentum, it really is just funny to me, but things just started coming as if like the universe does know, like, oh, she's moving, stuff is happening. Now let's send her auditions. And I booked a couple of things. I booked like 3 major roles this past year, which was great. And yeah, and then had my show and produced that. And it's crazy how you can go 1 year without doing anything and then the next year produce a bunch of stuff.
Tell me specifically the moment where representation came in. How did that happen?
So it took me probably 5 years to finally get representation. And I will say that I probably could have gotten it sooner. But again, I really had no idea what I was doing. And I think I was just waiting for someone. I really was that naive. I was waiting for someone to like be so excited that they wanted to represent me. And pretty soon I realized that it just wasn't happening for me specifically. And that I would have to be a little bit more proactive. Because I took an agent after maybe being a little bit desperate, and maybe this is something that someone can learn from. And I knew in the meeting, I'm like, this isn't going to be good, because she said to me, we have a really hard time getting people like you work. And in the back of my head, it was like, red flag, red flag. But she said, we can give it a shot. And I think I was just so like, oh my gosh, I just want an agent so bad. Sure. And they got me 1 audition in a year, and then they dropped me. And I wasn't surprised at all. I was like, I knew before I even signed with her that this was not going to be a good fit. So I was definitely smarter after that. I was like, okay, well, that's not going to happen again. And then I did a lot of research of like, well, who is getting actors jobs on the shows that I want to be a part of, or that I feel like I would fit. And I started
timeline. Were you working with us? Did you come to us before you had representation, or was it after or between the two, or?
It was just after. It was just after. Yeah.
The first agent, or like the first one that didn't get you so many results.
Yeah, it was after that one. So it was just after the one that I have now.
And just out of curiosity, okay. So when you started thinking about the way to brand yourself, and I'm just curious, and I'm not trying to like, honestly, if there's even anything negative you have to say about working with us, don't hold back, just because this is like my chat here. I am curious though, like, because the way you just spoke about targeting and finding somebody who actually reps people, who gets people on shows that you might be interested in. Was that something that happened consequent to a conversation with us? Because we do definitely discuss that a lot. Or was that something that you found out on your own? And if so, how did you come upon that information? Like that you should think that way and more focused and like lead yourself forward as opposed to what you were doing?
Yeah. I actually joined an acting kind of like career coaching group called Career Activate. And
Jonah Chow's.
Yeah.
Okay.
And actually she is kind of the reason, like that program was the reason that I ended up reaching out to you guys, because they often recommend doing something like Dream Reach Media to get yourself more footage and to have a better package. But so yeah, so I had joined their company, and they kind of helped me with the branding and getting that, at least just that mindset of like what I should actually be looking for when I'm looking for an agent or representation. So yeah, so that's what they helped me with, and it was very helpful. And also, by this time I'd been, in LA for quite some time. And so looking at rosters of different agents, I was able to see who I knew. I mean, that's what's kind of great is now I can like go through, an agent's roster and I'll know a handful of the actors on there. And
because that's amazing, because one of the easiest ways to get a conversation with a neighbor is by somebody who's with an agent is by somebody who's repped by them. So there's just to tie back the value of longevity in a community, that you start, having this network by exposing yourself over the years, and then you start seeing these faces again and realize the industry isn't that big, and you'll know people who have an in with people that you want to have help you somehow, that you couldn't have even thought about getting 2-3 years ago. And now suddenly there's like this 6 degree of separation situation happening.
Exactly. I mean, I can't imagine that it's very different in any industry. Even being out here in Atlanta right now, I honestly could not think of anyone who I knew out in Atlanta, but then just started to go through like Facebook and started to go through the agencies out here and go through their roster and realize that I did know quite a few actors that are with Atlanta agents. And it's just been so helpful. I mean, I connected with someone last night who I had only connected with her once, maybe 6 years ago in LA. And so, but now it was as if we were like best friends. And I'm really
something about that, because I think that's an important point you're making, because people think that you have to like nurture the heck out of all these relationships, where the reality is like, just don't be an asshole when you meet somebody, and they will remember you 3 or 4 years later. If there's a reason to reach out to somebody, it actually kind of can get annoying if you're reaching out to people for no reason. But when there's a purpose, I mean, I'm not saying if you have a really important connection that you want to nurture and take them out for coffee once in a while, that's fine. But like, for the most part, you meet an assistant to an agent, and then 4 years later, they're a junior agent at that agency. They'll remember you. You'll just, refer to that little chat you had, on Burbank Boulevard, and they'll remember.
Oh, exactly. And that's what I did. I just said, hey, I don't know if you remember me. We met at this thing. And then I remembered that you moved to Atlanta. I'm in town. Would you want to meet up, or could we even just talk on the phone? And she was just like, oh yes, absolutely. I mean, 100% happy to meet up and help. And I find that most people are, especially if you can just remind them how you met, or even if it was only like, hey, I saw you speak at an event and now I'm in your area, or I would just love to, pick your brain. I'm always surprised and delighted by how many people really are willing to help someone when they have something that they're trying to get done. It's great. But yeah, so that's, I don't know where we left off in the story.
No. I'm going to go back to that right now, because I would love to hear practically. I think one of the hardest, there's these sort of like vicious cycle loops that, actors, but really all creatives in this industry get stuck in, where, the first one being trying to get a gig, any kind, without having the resume, the reel, the best you might have are headshots, and then getting that first couple of gigs that then produces the reel, for you to get better gigs, that's the second problem then, right? That's when you come and start producing content like you did with us to kind of break that and get your reps and all that. But can you tell me a little bit mechanically and logistically how you were getting yourself gigs when you first came down here, you know, when you first arrived? And then, like, was it just the regular like LA casting online stuff, like submitting, you know, self-tape auditions or going to auditions, and then how did that sort of lead to your conversation with your first agent? Like, how did you actually get that agent, and then how did you actually get the second agent, and how were you getting yourself jobs along the way? I know there's a lot in there, but I'm sure you can structure
Yes.
that a bit.
So I first off was doing workshops. I was doing casting director workshops. Someone had recommended that I do that. And it was, honestly, it was a great way to just not only meet people like other actors, but also to meet casting. And for me, being a complete newbie, to learn how casting and auditions go in LA, because in Utah it's nothing like like there's like one casting director and everybody knows him and he's your friend and he's your acting coach. Like it's so different in LA. So it was a great learning process for me. And then one of them, Jamie Castro, brought me in for Grey's Anatomy I had no resume. I mean, I had indie stuff that I had done in Utah, and that was it.
What did they say was the reason they brought you in? Was it like a showcase, you performed, they liked it, they talked to you right then and there, or was it like months later they pulled you out of their drawer?
It was probably like a month later, but I mean, in the session with her, she had just given me like a one-line co-star, and I came in and did it, and she's like, try this. And then I did what she asked, and then she said, and that is how you book a co-star. And I was like, great. But I didn't think
in the first place. Like, how did you get the opportunity to be in front of her?
it was back then it was like called AIA or something. It was just one of those companies in LA that does hosts casting director workshops. But I mean, I was always looking for any opportunity I could to like really just learn the lay of the land. And but she brought me in. She was well known for that. And she wasn't, now she's like a head casting director, but at the time she was just like an associate. Okay. And she brought me in for Grey's Anatomy. I got that. But then, I mean, that was the only credit I had for years. And I would do other stuff. I would do like indie stuff or student films and that kind of thing, commercials. I had a commercial agent. All of my agents I have gotten through referrals. So the first agent that didn't work out so well, the very first one, she actually was an actor who I'd met in a class who became an agent. And so I reached out to her and said, hey, I'd love to sit down with you. And that didn't turn out so well, but my commercial agent, I just reached out to my friends who were actors. I said, who's your commercial agent? Would you be willing to refer me? And one of them said yes. And that agent met with me and then signed me. I'm still with that agent and I love my commercial agents. They're great. And then
help you get a theatrical agent, having a commercial agent, or do you think those two are completely unrelated?
Sometimes you can. I know I have a lot of friends who will go through their commercial agent to be like, hey, can I also be represented through your theatrical department? But it just depends on the agency. Mine in particular, they don't do that a lot. They don't rep across the board a lot. So they were interested in me theatrically, which is fine. So, I mean, I honestly, so with my manager now and my agent now, both of them, I literally just went through, I found shows that I thought I'd be good in, found co-stars that were on those shows, looked at who their reps were. I gathered a ton of information. So I saw which agents and managers got the most work for their clients. And then I looked at their rosters and said, oh, John's with them. Oh, Jeff's with them. Oh, Sarah's with them. Reached out to them and had them refer me. And that's how I'd get meetings. I've found that that's worked for me the best. So it is, I mean, going back to just relationships, like I can't stress it enough. And to be honest,
But setting up the meeting is one, and then what do you do when you actually get in with them? So what are you saying to them? Because you have a tendency to actually get repped with people that you speak to and actually get the auditions that you go to. So like, how do you let's talk about agents and stuff. What do you discuss when you're in the room with them that makes them want to sign you?
well, I mean, beforehand, like when I send them an email, I have a pitch package, short and sweet, to the point, that has everything kind of laid out so they can just click and be like, oh, okay, this is who she is. Which took me a while to figure out how, that's what they want. They want something that they can just be like, oh, it's embedded here. I can just click and press play and watch her stuff. I don't have to go anywhere. I don't have to read a bunch of like her life story. I would always keep it very brief. And then always have a friend be like, hey, you should look at her. And I think those two things would always work in my favor. And then just like meeting with them, it's always different. I mean, you never know what kind of personality you're going to meet. I will say though, that trusting your gut is a huge thing as far as like, do you get along or do you have a good feeling about it? Because based on that first one, I didn't have a good feeling about it. And I wish I had listened to myself. I might've saved myself a year, but I didn't, which is fine. You learn from that kind of stuff. Because now sitting in those meetings, you can kind of tell, like, are we going to work well together? And just having like the kind of conversations, being really realistic with like, this is where I am. This is what I expect from you, but I want to know what you expect from me to see if we're a match, and trying not to sugarcoat anything. It's such a funny industry where like being truthful and honest, but confident is, I think, your best ticket forward. It only hurts you when you try to like put on like this, it really does. It only hurts you when you like try to hide.
Has to do with the fact that your very job is authenticity, right? So if you come off in any way to a talent agent, especially who's very good and has a keen eye in terms of like if you're acting or not, like they're looking for that professionally because they want believable talent, right? So I feel like you're kind of shooting in the foot unless you're so phenomenal as an actor and you've come up with this whole consistent through line of like alter ego that you're going to play for some weird reason. But I think you're totally right. And they buy uniqueness too, right? So it's authenticity and uniqueness. And if you can just lay it out in the conversation and be you, I think that is the best bet.
Yeah, well, and when you're also honest about maybe your shortcomings or where you're like, hey, I need improvements in these areas, then if you're actually just going to get help from this person, or if you know what I mean. Like it's just you're making it easier for them to know who you are, because they're going to find out really fast. and yeah, but yeah, so that's
like,
that's
I heard once, you can fake an audition, but you can't really fake the role, right? So like that's why also for auditioning, you can come in and behave a certain way and try to do it the way you think they want it, but that's not really at the core you. And then when you're at page 30 in your script, like it's going to start falling apart. You can only carry that for so long. So unique you. What made you go out to Atlanta?
So I don't even know. My parents actually just moved here to Atlanta from Utah. And during the pandemic, the last couple of years, I had renewed my agency in Utah, because there's work there. It's not a lot, but there is some. And I would go and stay with my parents and be a local hire in Utah. So then when my parents decided to move and they just so happened to choose Atlanta, I was kind of like in the back of my mind thinking, well, Atlanta does have a great film industry, so I might just see if I can't get some reps out there. And being out here now, I just talking with some friends, I realized the opportunity that is here right now for actors especially, because right now they have a lot of big productions out here. So it's not necessarily a great place for creators, but it is a great place for actors because there's stuff happening here, there's stuff being produced here. Everything like the writer's room or the post-production is still being done in LA, but that middle part is really great for actors. So yeah, so that's why I'm here now, really just looking for like the next opportunity. I honestly didn't think I would be. This is very new. This is a very new idea, but gotta go where the work is. So
yeah, no, that's amazing. And so I guess I would segue from here into, you said, creators, and we are going to talk here just right now. Actually, is a good opportunity to start talking about your show, and let's bring this all back together. Your last performance, as like at least for this run, is going to be this Friday, right? What's the actual date then on Friday?
February 4th.
February 4th. So can you tell me a little bit about the journey of producing this one-woman show? It's in play format, right? Like it's in a theater. It's not something you're doing on Zoom or anything, right?
Yeah, it is live. There will be an on-demand recording of it that airs February 10th through March or something. That's up to the festival, and I forget what dates they are. But yeah, starting February 10th, you can watch it on demand as well. But it is live on February 4th. I wrote this. This is something I've wanted to write since it happened. I think I do think very creatively when I do kind of have like that filmmaker's mind when something is happening and I realize like this is actually really cinematic and I love it, even if it is dramatic and like I should be crying and I'm like, I need to remember this moment. And I kind of felt that way about my divorce. And so I'd always thought of doing it in like a series or a short film format. But every time I wrote it, it just didn't feel right. And I couldn't picture how it was going to be produced with different people, like other actors I was going to hire. And there was just so much of, at least at the time, to me, these obstacles that I could not see through. And then right before the pandemic, actually, a few people asked me if I had ever thought of doing a one-woman show because they thought that I would be entertaining to watch. And I was like, no, I hadn't. But then I started looking into it and I realized that this could be a good way to get my story out, to just get it out of me. Because I'm like, I know I want it out and I haven't been able to do that in other formats. So this would be just a good way to just get it out. And it's just me on that stage and no one else needs to tell me what to do. It can be very simple. And it wasn't until last year that I finally wrote a scene that all of a sudden I was like, there it is. I knew what it was and I knew how to do it. And so I hired a director, a coach who specifically helps with like one woman and like solo shows. And I wrote it in a few months. This was maybe one of the hardest things I've ever had to do because I decided to do it at the end of March. My coach suggested that I put it up at the Hollywood Fringe Festival, which was the beginning of August. And which sounds like a whole lot of time, but when you are producing and writing and performing the entire thing, it's not a lot of time. And of course, like I said, the universe just seemed to be like, oh, hey, Tatum's like moving again. Let's give her a bunch of stuff. And so April, May, June, I was filming quite a bit and I was getting a lot of work in Utah and in LA. So I was flying back and forth all the time, trying to write the story about something very personal. And like, I was literally like digging up old text messages and old videos of me and my ex and trying to create the story. And I didn't have a lot of time to like workshop it. Like a lot of times people will have like a reading to see how it flows. I just didn't have time for that. So I had to have a finished script by July. I honestly took longer than I should have and had it done by mid-July. Finally had a locked script. Took 2 weeks to work out memorizing 65 minutes of words. That's just all me, and characters. There's like 21 different characters, and the blocking, and then performed it. I mean, it was quite a wild ride, but I'm glad I did it that way a little bit, because it was just like jumping into the deep end of the pool. I think I needed to just get it out. And now I feel like, now that I have this, I feel like I can now take it any way I want to. So if I wanted to make that short film or even a feature film, I have the bones and like the structure of what this actually could look like. And so it's been a really fun experience. And this is a different festival. This is part of the solo festival, Solo Fest, that the Whitefire Theater in Sherman Oaks does every year. And it's the biggest solo show festival in the world. So they have an amazing theater, an amazing production team. And this will be the last time I will perform it in LA for an unforeseen amount of time, because I'm either going to take it to Scotland, or I'm just going to take a break and focus on some other things, maybe being out in Atlanta and that kind of thing. So this would be the last time to see it live in LA. I am very proud of it, and I think a lot of people can relate to it. If you've ever been in a relationship, you can relate. So
I'm excited, and I think I don't know if I haven't seen Book of Mormon, but it seems to have done really, really well. And I feel like whenever you layer a religious or not alternative, what should I say, like any kind of a viewpoint or bias into an experience that is sort of, the experience isn't exclusive, but the perspective is. So there's obviously, most people are not Mormon, so it adds a layer of curiosity and intrigue to have that sort of insight right into also a world that you're not familiar with, which I always love those kinds of marriages, like a familiar scenario in an unfamiliar place. It adds a lot of great stuff. So I'm sure it's amazing, and I haven't gotten around to seeing it, and I hope I can make it. It's just that with the newborn and everything, it's hard for me to do things in person. At the very least, I want to see the replay, but I am going to try and be there. And I encourage anybody else that lives in LA or nearby. Sherman Oaks is a great place to hang out and have a drink after too. So can you tell me a bit about logistically, because a lot of people in this community are, actually almost everybody is sort of in self-production mode, right? So we don't talk about stage plays or in-person shows very much. You've obviously produced and been a part of producing both cinematic, like scripted content. We've done some stuff together, but then what's the difference? Like what are some of the challenges that you faced with like getting this out? You kind of grazed over that the first performance should be at the Fringe Festival. Well, how does one even put a play in a festival like that? How does that even work?
Well, I mean, you can just go. You could Google Fringe festivals, and you'll probably find one in your city, wherever you are. Most cities have them. I mean, I just barely found out that Utah has one, and I had no idea. But and you can register. Some of them require like that you be accepted into the festival. Some just require a fee to be to take part of the festival. And then they usually have a great setup where they help you in like finding a theater, and that theater will help you in finding production and making sure that you have everything you need. I will say this was also, just creating this whole show was a good experience for me in learning how to ask for help. Because sometimes I think in any creative field, you oftentimes will get to this point where you feel that you need to do everything yourself, or at least know how to do everything yourself. And as actors, it's not different. I mean, I think a lot of actors are like, well, I have to be more than just an actor, so I have to I have to be able to raise money, and I have to be able to direct, and I have to, there's just a huge list of things to do. But because I was so pressed for time, a lot of it was just me hiring someone to tell me like what I should do, and hiring someone to take care of the lights, and hiring someone to take care of my blocking. I mean, even in the writing process, it got to a point where I needed to hire someone. I'm like, go through this and just cut out the fat for me. I can't see it anymore because I've spent too many hours staring at the screen. I need someone to just rip out what they think doesn't need to be there. And I realized, and I think at first my hesitation was like, oh, that's cheating. If I'm the writer, I should be doing all of that. But I realized like, no, that's not true. And in fact, this is actually more of the standard, is that you have several people who work on the writing, several people who work on the producing, and so on. So that to me was huge. Yeah, if you are interested in fringe festivals or solo theater specifically, there's so many resources out there. Jessica Lynn Johnson, who is my director, she's part of Soaring Solo Studios. She specifically helps people with solo shows. So that was great. And I think that is, again, goes to say, like, if there's anything you want to create, you can definitely Google that and coach, or, and find someone who can specifically help you in whatever you want to create. There's even coaches to specifically get plays and shows to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival in Scotland, because it's such a different beast than any other festival. There's people that actually will help you specifically with that. So that was the biggest lesson I learned. It's like, oh my gosh, there are people to help me with every little thing along the way, and I don't need to figure it out. In fact, I don't have time to figure it out. I would rather pay them to figure it out. And
That's
even yeah. And even with the money thing, I will say just real quick, because I did not have a lot of money. I wasn't planning on doing this, so I didn't have a lot budgeted, but I knew I wanted to do it. I knew, like, no matter what, I'll figure it out. I'll find the money. And I always did. I was always very mindful of, like, I can't like spend a whole ton, but like I think when you have that desire, you start thinking like a producer, and you start thinking like, well, where can I get the money, or where can I find help, or where can I like touch mine, kind of thing. I think just in the movement forward, I was able to figure all the finances out as well, especially around me that had done this before, that I could just ask them for help. So this is huge, even when it comes to the finances.
Yeah, that's so true. And here with Braces in this community, like we always talk about paying attention to that sort of rule of 80-20 and your time. Let me just make sure that the connection's solid. I feel like am I dropping out, or is it Tatum? It's okay, cool.
I'm not sure.
I think it's Tatum, yeah.
Okay. So bottom line is, producing is so important. When you think about producing, like, it's so important to not think that means that you have to be like the director and the editor and do everything yourself. Like, it really is about basically putting the teams together and having people sort of complement and supplement your shortcomings, and put people and mechanisms in place to do, like, and it ends up rendering a much better result, right? Because you're spending less time on things that you don't know how to do or don't care to do, and you're actually focusing on the stuff that you should be focusing on, which is just being the best performer and putting the best possible story together and delivering that, right? And which is kind of like probably the reason you came to work with us on your reel, where it was, something that you could have produced completely by yourself, likely, but you just kind of wanted to be the performer and come in and have a team kind of take care of a lot of the logistics and fine points, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly why I came to you, because I was like, I don't want to have to worry about it, but I want the result. I want the outcome. Yeah. And I think I finally had to get over I'm like, I'd rather hire someone that knows how to do it than take months and months and months for me to figure it out by myself.
So the play or the one woman show is about your Mormon divorce. It's called, what's the name of the actual play?
It's called Redeem Her.
Redeem Her.
Redeem Her. Yeah. Nice little play on words. It is how I screwed up my perfect Mormon life is the subtitle. But yeah, it's basically about my divorce and religion and how I got through to the other side. But yeah, I hate to say that I'm like, I love it, but I really do. I think it showcases me really well. That's another great thing about creating your own stuff is you can choose what people see of your best work. And I feel like this is some of my best work.
Amazing. And that's at the Whitefire Theater in Sherman Oaks on Friday, right?
On Friday, 8 p.m. You can go to whitefiretheater.com to get tickets. Or if you follow me on Instagram in my link in bio, you can get tickets. My Instagram is at Yager, which
Can you spell that out?
I will, I'll put it in the chat.
But also I want to send this out to more people. So for those who aren't going to be here.
It is YOGGER. YOGGER.
Everybody should follow Tatum anyways, because she's just a joy to observe and see how, she's progressing through her career. And I'm sure, do you respond to DMs if anybody has questions, or is that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, and sometimes they go into that little side file, how you have like those 3 different, but I will eventually see it, I'm sure.
So at Yager, YOGGER, catch her at the Whitefire Theater on Friday for her amazing show. And now I do want to, before I send you off, give the opportunity for anybody who's here in the Draces community to ask any questions, if you're okay with that, to stick around for a few minutes. Yeah?
Sure, absolutely.
Great. So just pop a number 1 in the chat if you want to speak to Tatum here, or you can also just write out your question. In the meantime, I did see that all have asked a question. I'm not sure if it's for Tatum or me or just a general question, but she wrote, I always get confused about reaching out to people on a certain show you would be on. Is it agents who represent talent on the show? Because then I'm reaching out to people who already have my brand in their roster. Olive, can you specify more like what you meant by that?
Hi, yes, thank you so much. I'm sorry, I'm not going to turn on my camera because I have COVID and it's just not a good sign. But thank you so much. It was lovely hearing you. And I just was wondering about, so you spoke about getting agents by looking at the TV shows and co-star roles on those TV shows. Were those co-stars that were in your brand? Because so I know the type of actors that I act like, that I think that are like the place I want to go. However, I don't want to reach out and be represented by their agents because they already have somebody in my brand type. So do you just go for like people who are working a lot with that specific show that don't have your brand?
That's a good question. No, I've never been that specific. And I will say, I would say go for it anyway and let them tell you what they think, because there are a lot of agencies who will specifically rep a certain brand. There's certain agencies that are like, we're all about the Latin people, or we're all about the quirky, weird character type people. And there's certain agencies that will only rep that kind of brand. So I wouldn't necessarily, I know what you're saying, but I wouldn't necessarily count them out. If you are looking at the agency though, and you do see people, you see a lot of people like you, like for me, it's like, oh, there's a lot of brunettes. I know that the chances of them wanting to rep me are probably slim, because it's not like there's a lot of differentiation between that, but that isn't my brand. You know what I mean? Like that's just me looking at a roster and being like, they all look like me. And that that has stopped me from getting a meeting, but I wouldn't say the brand has. So those are kind of two different things. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Because I'm very much the second brand that you spoke of is me. And I've looked at other people that are in that brand, but then I'm like, oh, I don't want to like be the back seat, you know, but I love that because maybe that's what they specialize in. So thank you for opening my mind to that and being so inspirational to all of us.
Oh yeah, you're welcome.
And I think to piggyback off of that, you know, I knew an agent or manager called Chuck Harris, who his whole thing was like he represented all the sort of circus freak kind of, you know, like people who could do all kinds of weird things. Like that was his thing. So if you needed somebody really, really strange with like eye piercings, all like, you know, piercings in their eyeballs and whatever, like you'd hit up Chuck. And so I think what you actually said, Tatum, is really valuable. And I've never actually, I don't think I've ever articulated this or even really thought of that. There is a tendency to think, well, they already have somebody like me on their roster, so why even bother? But yeah, still bother because you also bring your unique sort of nuance to the table too. And so if there's a couple, even if they're not like super, oh, we just represent quirky people, they might, you know, it might be valuable to them to offer 2 or 3 sort of options to the casting director who's asking for something. And I don't think that they would necessarily favor one over the other, right? I mean, it's just whoever brings more in will eventually fall into favor, right?
Yeah, and again, it really is how you just don't know how the agency works, but they'll tell you. So it's worth reaching out.
Yeah, let them decide. That's a great additional layer that that you should keep in mind. So Chad, unmute yourself, bud.
Yeah, man. Hey, great job, Tatum. That means everything you've talked about. You're so clear. I don't think I heard a single or anything in your sentence. You were just like consistent. I could have like written it out. It could have been perfect. It's amazing. Which is hard for me to do. So anyway, curious, you know, Atlanta, I've heard a lot about Atlanta, and I've heard Atlanta is like a great place for that. I think that's a crazy and scary thing that you did, that you went from Los Angeles, I think, to Atlanta. I know you went for your family, but are you finding that the opportunities are a lot more there, readily available? I know here it's been sort of stilted in a lot of ways, like there'll be commercials and things here for me, but it's just sort of everything's sort of dropped. I don't know if that's because of the pandemic, but did you find that it picked up for you a lot more in Atlanta? I mean, while you've been there, and do you enjoy it out there?
So I hate to burst your bubble, but I have only been out here for a couple of weeks, 3 weeks. My parents literally just moved out here and I helped them move here. So far in my experience, just talking to friends who've been out here for like 5 years, they all say resoundingly, yes, there's just more auditions out here. And it's just a good time for it, where like it's not as big as LA yet, but there's a lot of great production here. So there's a lot of work to be had, and it's good quality work. You're not going to see a lot of indie productions here, but you are seeing a lot of bigger productions because you have Marvel and Disney and a lot of TV shows out here. So it's good for that. So I have yet to see how it will do for me, but I'm not joking when I say, I'm not like this isn't just like a blanket statement. Everyone I've talked to has said, yes, this is just, I've gotten way more auditions here than I ever did in LA. And that's why for me, because I'm married, my husband lives in LA. So like for me to just be like, I think I'm going to live in Atlanta for the year is a big deal. But my husband also my husband now is very supportive, and he's just like, hey, if you feel like that's your next step, then we'll make it work. I'll come see you whenever I can. And, you know, so that's the best answer I can give, having not been here for very long. But, you know, if you follow me and DM me in a few months, and I'll let you know how it's going.
Miserable. No, yeah, it looked like a really great place, and but it because we all production companies here, and I'm working on a feature film, but it's hard knowing that probably not the best place for creatives, probably building stuff like you said, but I do know that they have like a better, at least they used to have a better rate for producing like a film there. I know that like the tax incentives are a lot higher in Atlanta, I think, right? 35% or something. Yeah.
Yes. So that kind of stuff is, I think it's just less, there's just less of a community of people creating. Like productions come here to film, but you don't have a lot of producers and stuff just living here. It's more, does that make sense? I mean,
Yeah.
you do, but they're like filming Ozark or something. So it's like a different,
It originated.
where LA has like all of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No. Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense.
The reason why, and this is speculative, but it makes perfect sense. Where like reason why you'll see probably more auditions is that there's just it's not necessarily that there are more opportunities, but there's more there's it's not as saturated. There aren't as many people out here fighting for the same jobs, right? So you like, if let's say there's 1 million actors in LA, there might only be 100,000 in Atlanta or something, or even less. And so that opens up less. It's a less crowded space, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And the fact is that there are a lot of procedural TV shows out there, and also just like big shows that tend to need a lot of characters, and like Walking Dead was a big thing and stuff out there. But like there tends to be this kind of, because it seems to me like you can shoot a lot more sort of vast and bigger scenes and everything in Georgia, it seems like. So you have these really densely populated shows and stuff out there too. And Tyler Perry has a studio out there, and he's getting more and more into TV shows. And why did you decide to move as opposed to, since everything's sort of self-taping right now, just kind of like be available and to fly out and submit, from LA though?
Right. That's still sort of up in the air, but just kind of the vibe that I'm getting so far is that agencies out here don't like that as much, just because they've had issues in the past where, they're like, oh, you're booked, but you have to be here tomorrow for a COVID test. And they're like, I'm not there. And that kind of thing. So I kind of just wanted to at least take like a year and establish myself here and kind of just show Atlanta, okay, I'm serious, and get to know the casting and people out here.
Well, let's have a follow-up call in a year. Actually, if you can remember, guys, like ping me, and let's take 12 months and talk to Tatum after that and see where her career landed.
That would be cool. Yeah, I'd love that.
There's another question for you. You got time for one more?
Sure, yeah, let's do it.
All right, Francisco, you're up.
Hi, Tatum. Thanks for joining us. It's been great hearing you and meeting you.
Oh, yeah.
My question is, okay, so you made this one-woman show, and here we're all about like producing our own content. And what I'm, I guess, learning or kind of like dealing with is like you create something creative that's like from your heart, and you're like, yes, I love this, I want to play this. Then you go, wait a minute, this needs to be kind of on brand. Does this show everything I want to? Is this the same old thing I've done before? Was that something that you kind of underwent with this show, or was it more like you everything was from your heart and you were like, look, this is what it is, and I think this is my brand, it is me, here we go? Or what was that process like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think really I was just saying in writing it was just like, this is me, this is my story. So I don't really care what it says, other than that it says what I want it to say. And so what I did learn from it though, because I've always been a pretty dramatic actress, kind of. The funny thing is like I come off very serious, but I did a lot of comedy and commercials, and a lot of the stuff I've done has been kind of comedic. And so I'm trying to find where my brand lies has always been a little bit difficult for me, because I love being funny, but I'm not like your Amy Poehler kind of funny. You know what I mean? I'm definitely more dry, more dark. And so trying to trying to create that as a brand has been a little bit difficult for me. So writing this show that is ultimately like the biggest, like, here is my heart, there you go, this is me 100%. I think I finally saw what my brand was, because while it does have a lot of humorous moments and you're kind of laughing because I mean, I'm talking about some really heavy stuff in a very kind of cheeky way. It's funny, but at the same time, you're going to cry. And I realized, like, oh my gosh, that's me. I want you to laugh, but I want you to cry at the same time. And I want you to feel that deep thing. And so in creating this very vulnerable thing, I think I finally did find what that brand was, which is, I'll be honest, still really hard to translate in like materials. I'm like, how do I show you that that's who I am in like a headshot? But I'm working on it, and I think honestly this has helped me a ton. And just it is why I'm like, I really want everyone to see this show, especially like industry people. I wish, I'm like, can I just show you this, because it is me completely. It's the kind of comedy I am, it's the kind of drama I am, it's all of it. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but like in the process, I would recommend it to everybody. I'm like, be as vulnerable as you can in what you create, because I think in the process of creating your own stuff, you will find your brand.
Totally. Yes. I think, I mean, I agree with you with what I've done. Some of the stuff I did was like way out there, and I'm like, whoa, like what even is this? But that's how you find, you see your true self and you assemble the pieces from there. So I love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I love it. And, I mean, I feel like after what you were saying, tying all these things together, you're doing this as a one-woman show. This might be your kind of last run, especially on the West Coast for a while. You're going to get back to other things, but, that headshot might only, the headshot only needs to be the first click, right? And then once they're in, what do they see? And that's where I think, for your demo reel, you could pull like a couple of the most, telling sections of dialogue there, and maybe just translate those into a couple of little 2-minute shorts, and or even just 1 or 2, and tag those on, or maybe open your reel with those, and then you kind of get them in the door, and then they see that unique voice. I think that would be a great way to maybe help translate that into materials.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. I mean, even just taking a scene or two and making it a short is not a bad idea.
Well, yeah. I if you have any questions about that, I know a guy who could help. But thank you for this, Tatum. I think we're out of time here. Let me see here Mariana just says congratulations. I think everybody loves you here. So obviously come back. Maybe I'll make you an honorary member of the Drace's Facebook group, just so that you can stay in touch and update us. And I'll let you actually, you know what, I'm going to invite you to that group, and then go ahead and post your link for the show, if there's like a, ticket or anything like that. And then if anybody here, could take that link and share with people in LA, I really want to help Tatum go out on a bang here. As she hopefully goes and takes the show to Scotland, but we'll see. So yeah, thank you, Tatum, for being here, and thanks for doing this with us.
Yes, thank you all. Thank you so much. And I'll share that information with you, and you can watch it on demand later if you guys can't make it out to LA, or because of COVID reasons. I totally understand. But thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. And everybody else, we'll see you guys next Thursday. Tatum, it's been a pleasure. I'll be in touch with you after this, okay? Take care.
We'll see you.
Bye.